board, however, generally does not respond to public comment during board meetings by offering commentary or answering questions. The board also invites commentators and the public to contact the board or the superintendent directly with any specific questions or comments. The board, through the chair and the superintendent, may respond to questions and comments offered during public comment or shared directly, and in responding may also direct members of the public to the appropriate staff for a response. Are there comments from the public? Are we up? Are we up?
Yeah, TV doesn't work.
Oh, okay.
They haven't turned it.
Okay.
What do you want to know?
If there's anyone on Zoom who wants to make a public comment,
There are no raised hands.
thank you very much.
I know.
Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you, Laura. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Nicola. All in favor? Any opposed?
I'm not opposed. I just have a question about it, but it doesn't need to be talked about now. It can be talked about later.
Is it?
Like later, not
Oh,
in
okay.
this meeting.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. I was like, where in the agenda? Yes. No, it's fine. Okay. So the motion carries unanimously?
That's fine. Yep. Do you want my question? I'm not trying to be weird.
Don't keep us in suspense.
We have talked about the Board of Ed questions, and I
Yeah.
love the idea of having a question and a response, and it
Yes.
holds everybody accountable, and everybody has access to it. As I'm thinking about all of this, I would like to rethink having a Board of Ed member name next to all the questions. I
Okay,
think
so
that
it's a format.
It's a format thing. I
Okay.
would like us to be able to freely ask our questions without it to be a permanent record everywhere, like for other people to come back and be like, hey, this is all your fault that you raised this question. Like, I just want it to not be that way.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, Jen.
So but it's a conversation that we could have later on.
And to form, yes.
But it's,
that's, yes.
yeah.
Okay. Chair's report. Good evening. I just have a few quick remarks. We have a full agenda tonight. The building work at Cedar Mill and Middlebrook continues on pace. Again, thank you to the teachers, staff, and students for their patience and understanding as we continue to follow the advice and the plans of our consultants and experts. Kevin will provide a full update at our next meeting. If anyone has questions, please direct them to Principal Hickens or Principal Falcom. I'd also like to bring everyone's attention to a new feature of the board's consent agenda, a BOE questions and response document. The document will be updated every 2 weeks and shows questions presented by board members to the administration with answers and date of response. Finally, we are aware of the poor sound quality of the Zoom and YouTube meeting broadcasts. We are actively working on a solution. In the meantime, I'm speaking loudly. I'm doing my best to do it into the microphone, and throughout the meeting, I'll ask everyone to try to do the same. Thank you.
Some of us are a little challenged with that. I'll try. All right.
You can just move it closer.
Okay. Kevin did ask me to share a couple of things with you. The first has to do with the commended scholars. I'm just going to read through the press release. Wilton High School is pleased to recognize 21 students who have been named commended students in the 2024 National Merit Scholarship Program. These commended students placed among the top 5% of more than 1.3 million students who entered the 2024 competition by taking the 2022 preliminary SAT National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, the NMSQT. I'm going to read their names. I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's name. Jonathan Andriuk, Anderson Campbell, Alexander Cohen, Piper Dean, Grace DeBuono-Krafik, Yana Giannutsos, George Huberty, Nicholas Huberty, Rohil Jain, Arsh Khan, Saranish Kandawal, Jack Leventhal, Ethan Lipper, Eric Liu, Nolan Medalla, Eli Patania, Anu Pila, Brivik Sato, Jason Sherrick, Anant Srinivasan, and Adi Vora.
Congratulations.
Yes. Kevin also asked me to remind everybody that we're going to have an early release this Friday for professional learning. Monday is an observation of Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples' Day, and Tuesday we have another full-day professional learning day. So, just to remind everybody.
Yes. So children are home Monday and Tuesday, half day Friday.
Yes.
Yes.
Joyous time.
It is.
Yes.
Review and discuss. The first item is the Growth and Achievement Report and reflects BOE goals number 1 through 5. Chuck is going to be leading us through the discussion, and I just ask if we can reserve questions till the end, and then we can go around the table.
Okay, could somebody put that up for everybody?
Yeah, we're having issues with Zoom.
Okay, well, while we're waiting, I think you all have a copy in front of you. So tonight I'm going to share with you the results of last spring's state-mandated standardized testing. Now, it's a lot of data, so I'm going to try my best to summarize it and make some meaning of it for you. I think it might be helpful to hear the entire presentation before we engage in a discussion, but of course, if you have any quick clarifying questions, please feel free to ask. Let's see if this works. There we go. So I thought it might be helpful to begin by putting standardized testing results in context. This is a chart of what a comprehensive assessment system looks like. The left-hand column lists various types of assessments and divides them into levels of assessment. The top level includes the statewide accountability assessments, the SBA and SAT. The next level includes what's known as interim benchmark assessments, which in this district is the NWA MAP. And then finally, classroom-based formative assessments, and I listed just a few examples here. The center column clarifies the question the level of assessment is designed to answer, and the right-hand column delineates the audience for or the users of that assessment information. So, the state accountability assessment helps leaders decide if enough students are meeting benchmark so that they can make decisions how to best deploy human and material resources. Interim benchmark assessments help building and program leaders and teachers identify which students are meeting which standards so they can make decisions about curriculum priorities, grouping and instructional practices, intervention services, and so forth. Formative assessments help teachers decide what is next in the learning for each student. What's really important here is that we use these assessments for the purposes they are intended to serve. In other words, to answer the questions they are designed to answer. So I guess what I'm trying to caution everyone against is what's known as interpretation error. These results I'm discussing today, the state assessments, are not designed to provide anyone with the granular information they need to make specific program or instructional decisions. We look to other data for those decisions. These results will help us as district leaders and members of the Board of Ed to decide if the district is meeting its goals and whether resources are being used as effectively as they can be or whether we have enough resources. Does that make sense? So in other words, you can't use state accountability assessments to answer what's next in the learning for each student, or even which students are meeting which standards. And likewise, you can't use formative assessments to answer the question, are enough of our students meeting benchmark? Okay? So I guess this is kind of a roundabout and lengthy way of saying that what we can interpret from these state tests is very limited. It's really limited to, are enough students meeting benchmark? Okay?
Can I ask you a quick question, though?
Sure.
We've always talked about MAP testing being an indicator of how our kids are expected to do on the SBA.
So with the MAP, it is predictive of the SBAC.
But now we're saying that there's really no correlation, or we can't infer anything based on this, that they don't really overlap.
Well, these tests don't give us the information that the MAP does. But the MAP is sufficiently correlated with the SBAC that we can somewhat predict, and it's not a perfect prediction. They are different tests that measure different things.
Okay. But they kind of all overlap.
All of them overlap.
Okay. I mean, so they're not totally isolation, like in
Not
isolation.
totally isolated.
Okay.
The point with this particular group is what I see people doing is trying to figure out information that you can't get from this. the information that sometimes people are seeking is better gleaned from other assessments.
I would agree with that.
So the map isn't going to tell a teacher what's next in the learning. It will tell the teacher broad areas that they need to be looking at, and then they need to look at their classroom assessments for each individual child.
Okay.
Okay? Make sense? Maybe?
It makes sense. I just think we should be honest, right? I mean, they all kind of go together and correlate, and there is some prediction from one to another, and we can get some information from one. I see what you're saying.
Okay.
You're being more particular than I am, I guess, but I just don't want to isolate them completely, as in this only tells us one information and this only tells us one thing.
It is a comprehensive assessment system, and we're all trying to measure student performance against standards. It's really a matter of what kind of inferences can we draw from the data. And the inferences from a state accountability test is limited.
Is one.
Limited.
Okay.
Okay, next slide if we could. Oh, I think I can do it. Sorry. Matthew, why isn't it working? There we go. I thought, rather than just plowing through the data and leaving you to make your own inferences, I would share with you what I think is basically an executive summary of the results. And then if you want, you can zone out while I talk about the data. All right, so I'm going to go through what I think are the highlights, and then I'm going to talk about areas for growth. So overall, Wilton students continue to demonstrate very high levels of achievement and growth on Connecticut State summative assessments. We're near the top in the state in ELA and math. Wilton High School had the highest combined SAT scores in Connecticut State, including Durg A, first in reading and writing and second in math. Wilton High School had the highest percentages of students passing the NGSS, the Next Generation Science Standards in Connecticut, including Durg A. Wilton also returned to pre-pandemic passing rates on AP examinations in 2023. Wilton continues to be at or near the top of Connecticut State in terms of college preparation and persistence. Grade 7 students had the top scores in both ELA and math in Connecticut State, including Durg A. And students in grade 5 and 8 scored in the top 6% of districts in Connecticut on the NGSS. So there's a lot to celebrate here. We're doing very, very well. Our students are doing very, very well. Now, areas for growth based upon this standardized testing. The current 4th, 5th, and 10th grade cohorts have a relatively greater number of students performing below benchmark in both ELA and math than other cohorts. Those are cohorts we need to keep an eye on. In general, the academic growth at Cider Mill is good, but to be more in line with the achievement levels of other Durg A districts, we need to accelerate academic growth even more. And to a lesser degree, that is also true for ELA at Middlebrook. Although the academic growth of our students with high needs has improved significantly over the years, we are still seeing inconsistency in growth across grades, subjects, and cohorts, and I'll show that to you. The next one's very important to me. To improve or even sustain the academic growth of our multilingual learners, we will probably need to increase staffing levels. We have almost quadrupled in the past 2 years. We had 4 students move into the district since the beginning of the school year across all of the different schools who speak no English. I have 2 teachers spread across 4 schools that have different schedules. We're just simply not able to meet the needs of that group, and I'm worried about what impact that's going to have on their achievement. And we need to keep in mind that if ELL services don't meet their needs, many of those students end up in special education. So we're going to end up spending the money one way or the other. And as cohorts age up, we need to support Wilton High School in sustaining their work around academic growth, particularly in math. So maybe I'll just pause there. Does anybody have any questions about kind of that executive summary?
Just, I know you're all about money, but if we put the financial resources to the ELL now, that would save us money.
I think in the long run, yes. Because again, a lot of those students, if they don't show progress, end up being referred for special ed, and many of them qualify. And the expenses in special ed are much higher than the expense of an additional ELL teacher. Any other questions? Okay. So what I'm going to go over tonight are the Smarter Balanced Assessment, the Next Generation Science Standards, the Connecticut SAT School Day results, Advanced Placement, and College Acceptance. Just to remind you, these are the levels for all three of those tests. Students are considered to have made benchmark if they score either a 3 or a 4. All right, let's start with ELA. So this is the current and historical data for grades 3 through 8. It's helpful to look at this data in two ways, what we call cross-cohort and within cohort. Do you mind if I go up there and point? Because I think it'll be easier. Okay. So cross-cohort is when you look across here. So let's look at third grade. Last year's third grade students, 67.6% met benchmark. This year, 74.6%. So that's good, but remember, those are different groups of kids. Here, fourth grade, 78.1 to 74.2. That might seem like a drop, but if you look this way, that's the same group of students. So that's quite an improvement, right? It's a different curriculum, right? It's from third to fourth, but they were able to increase the number of students meeting benchmark. And that's significant because fourth grade curriculum, one of the things you have to realize is that the curriculum is not even across all grade levels. Some years the curriculum really ramps up, and fourth grade, I think, is one of those. So if you look for the cohort, we're seeing some improvement. If you look from here to here, again, this seventh grade is really not moving out of the park. Eighth grade is pretty much staying where it is. So that's kind of how you need to look at things, both within cohort and across cohorts, to see how students are really performing. Does that make sense? All right, so this is the same data that I just showed you, but broken down by level for each grade. Generally speaking, we want to see a shift in numbers to the right, increasing numbers of students at levels 3 and 4, and not see a shift to the left, decreasing numbers of students at levels 3 and 4.
Michelle, can you just define levels 1, 2, 3, 4?
Sure, if you go, let me go back. Maybe I'm going the wrong way. So those are the descriptors of the different levels.
Students who not met, okay. Got it.
The state uses the term below benchmark, approaching benchmark, met benchmark, and exceeding.
Okay.
Okay, so again, the story really lies in a comparison of cross-cohort data and within cohort data. And you'd have to flip between the charts to do the within cohort comparison. But it basically tells the same story as the data I just showed you. Personally, I don't find this to be very helpful. I think you really need to have a very in-depth understanding of each cohort, the demands of the curriculum at each grade level, and the composition of the grade level teams to discern any patterns. And so far, I haven't been able to see any stable trends. So the data is here for you to delve into if you wish. I wasn't planning on going through each slide for each grade level, but if you have any questions, please let me know.
That in fourth grade, like math.
The whole curriculum in fourth grade
So you
does
have
kind of,
everything.
yes.
Are there other grades where it's similar?
Yeah, I mean, for me, seventh grade seems to be a very tough year. Students also seem to struggle whenever they make a transition. Now, I don't know if that's a curriculum issue or it's an expectation around curriculum issue, but when I look at it, sixth grade is also very hard in math,
Right, okay.
so,
Like moving from fifth to sixth.
yes. The content in sixth grade, there's a lot to cover in sixth grade to get kids ready for seventh grade.
Okay.
Again, the curriculum, the standards just aren't even across grade levels. Any other questions? No? Okay. So I'm going to zip through these particular and come to the DIRG comparison. So this is Wilton compared to the other DIRG A districts, Darien, Easton, New Canaan, Reading, Litchfield, Weston, and Westport. In terms of ELA, we're smack in the middle of the pack for most of these grade levels, but we're first in grade 7, but next to last in grade 4. As I mentioned in the beginning, if our goal to be is to be in line with other DIRG A districts, we need to double down on our work on accelerating growth at certain grade levels. If you combine the results across all grade levels, we're again pretty much right in the middle of the pack. But you'll notice that there really is not a great deal of difference. Didn't I do that? Okay, I'll start over. If you combine the results across all grade levels, we're again pretty much right in the middle of the pack. But you'll notice that there is not really a great deal of difference between most of the district, either single points or tenths of points. The outlier, of course, being New Canaan. Okay. Wait a minute, sorry. How did we end up in math?
You gotta go backwards, you're going forwards.
Okay. Okay. So growth. Matthew, I don't like this.
You want me to run drive for you?
Maybe. What happened?
It's gone anyway. You said you didn't like it.
Got offended.
I didn't like this thing. Here, Matthew, you can do it. Okay, so we're up to growth. Let me talk a little bit about growth for a minute while they try to fix the technology. The way SBA does growth is very different than the way MAP does growth. The way the SBA does it is that it sets growth targets for each student based upon their performance from the previous year. The goal is to make sure that anybody who is below grade level makes grade level within 3 years. That's how they set the growth targets. Their goal is to make sure if the kids meet those growth targets, they will be at grade level within 3 years. So,
Can you just talk for a minute then about the relationship between growth and achievement?
yeah, so growth has to do with where kids start and where they end up. It's not their absolute achievement.
Right.
Their absolute achievement is the level at which they're achieving. So a student could show great growth, but yet not make benchmark.
And so they're saying that if the growth trend
Yes.
follows over a certain amount of time, then they
Right.
hit it and
So if,
even.
right, if a student meets 100% of their growth target 3 years in a row, they will make
Make
benchmark.
benchmark. Okay.
All right.
Do
So-
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do we track that? Do we track like our, let's say, kids who are 2s
Yes,
and then watch their growth over the, 3 years
Yes.
and see?
that's what this data
Okay.
is.
Okay, so that's what this percentage is telling?
Yeah.
Okay,
Now, I'm showing you the averages, but we
Okay.
have it for each individual
Okay.
student.
okay.
So Ruth, this is not the percentage of kids who met their growth target.
Right.
It's the percentage of that target number that they met, the average percentage. So like if your target was 50 points and you met 49 points, you
Mhm.
would have not met your target, but you would have met 98% of your target.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
So, and it's challenging in a high-performing district to meet that because many of our kids are already at level 3 and level 4. So
So the average is,
they have less room to grow. So they have different targets than someone who's at level 1.
okay. So, but we do, so this is kind of an average across the grade, but then we also do look per student
Yes.
over.
Okay, so the data in this chart, as Matthew just said, shows the average percent of growth targets achieved by our students. The goal is for every student to meet 100% of their target. Some exceed them, some don't quite make it, so this is the average. Generally speaking, this data is quite good, although not as good as the year before last's growth, which you may remember placed us at the top of the state accountability system. Our growth the year before last was phenomenal. This is still very good, but
So
not what it was the
You're talking
year.
about the 82 to 70.
Yes.
Yes, okay, for each
Right.
line.
Yep.
And I guess if we wanted to see like a district 4 through 8 average, we could get that too.
Can you do that, Matthew?
Yes,
That would be great.
Like
Thank
that,
I think, do we have that? Yeah, this is that average.
Oh, that's that combined in the previous one?
Yes.
Okay.
See how quickly I got what you want?
okay. Matthew, did we miss the
We
DERG?
didn't do the DERG yet, sorry.
Okay, so this is our growth compared to the DERG. And again, it was mostly in the middle to the middle top, except for 8th grade, which was at the bottom. Next slide. When you combine across all grade levels, we are 3rd in the DERG. But you'll notice again, not much of a difference between districts. The outlier again being New Canaan. Okay, next one. Now I want to talk a little bit about comparisons of students with and without disabilities. This chart shows the performance of our students who receive special education services in 2022 and 2023, which provides a cross-cohort and within cohort comparison. You'll notice some bright spots and some areas for growth, although if you look closely, the story is more nuanced. So for instance, if you look at 4th grade, the cross-cohort change looks not good, right? Minus 18. But the within cohort change, they increased it by 14%. So in other words, the 2022 group performed much better than the 2023 group, but the 2023 group performed much better than it did the year before. And I would just point out 7th grade, again, is a real bright spot. Okay, next one. This is the same data, but includes the actual numbers of students involved. You'll notice that these numbers are not large, which means that small changes, just 1 or 2 students, can cause large changes in percentages. It's also important to note that these numbers can change over the course of the school year. Students are exited and entered into special education over the course of the year, so the numbers aren't really very clean. We're not comparing the same students, so.
And this is just students in seats, right, as Kevin?
So these are the students who took who were in special ed when they took the test.
But like, these are enrolled students,
Yes.
they're not students that have, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But for instance, it's quite possible that somebody was in special ed and was exited just before they took the test.
Right, or right after, yeah.
Or were entered right before.
Yep.
So, again, this is difficult data to collect.
Check how many students do not take it at all.
You know, I don't have that information offhand, but I can find out. It's a very small percentage because the state is very strict in terms of who can be exempted. It's primarily our students with cognitive impairments.
Okay.
Okay.
And some of them take the Connecticut alternate assessment.
Right.
We don't report that because we really shouldn't, it's so few students.
Okay.
But they have a separate assessment that they take, that we have special ed staff who are trained to deliver.
Okay.
And in the science too, there's a special science assessment that they take.
Okay. And I guess in fairness to those students, we're really just checking on their individual growth,
Yeah.
right? It's really hard to measure school to school based on students in special education because their degrees of differences are so great.
Yep.
Okay.
Next slide. Okay, this is a comparison of students with and without disabilities. And as you'll notice, there's still quite an achievement gap. But I have to say that over the years, it has narrowed significantly and that we're making good progress. For those of you who have been here a while, you can remember that the numbers were much, much lower for students with disabilities. So we're gaining ground slowly, but we are closing the gap. Okay, let's move on to math. All right, so this is the current and historical data for math in grades 3 through 8. Again, it's helpful to look at this data in two ways, cross-cohort and within cohort. You'll notice that over the years, our performance in math has improved significantly. Again, for those of you who have been here a while, you remember 2015 and 16, how we did in math. So we're really making some really good improvements. The same is true here. If you look at, for instance, 4th grade in 2023, that looks like a drop from the prior year if you do a cross-cohort comparison, but if you do the diagonal where they were in 2022 in 3rd grade, that's quite a significant increase. So,
Those 5th graders who then went on to 6th grade.
yes,
An unbelievable.
yeah.
Chuck, what do you say for like when a class goes, I'm looking at 3rd grade 2019 to 2021, and I go, this is old data and it bounced back, but like how does how does a class go from 77 to 54? Is
Well-
that just like,
It's not really that
It's
class,
COVID.
because you missed
Missed a
2020.
year.
right,
You have to skip down.
oh, I see, because it's missing, 21
Because
is totally
the
missing.
pandemic year is
Yeah.
totally missing.
No, but the 2020 is missing, got it.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Okay, next slide, again, it's high level. I'm not going to go through these slides, but if you have any questions, just let me know. Okay, DIRG comparison. So in terms of the DIRG comparison, we are at or near the top in grades 6 to 8, but are at or near the bottom in grades 3 through 5. However, in a moment, I'm going to show you the math growth data for grades 3 through 5, which is really quite good. So what we're doing is working. We just need to do a little bit better to improve our standing in the DIRG. Next slide. Combined, we are 4th in the DIRG, although I'd like to point out that the difference between 3rd and 4th is 0.4 of a percentage point, and personally, I think of that as a tie. Next slide. Okay, so this is growth in math. It continues to be strong, although again, not as strong as 21-22, which was our historic high in terms of growth, but still very strong. Next one, Matthew. Okay, so our growth compared to other DIRG districts is quite strong. 1st in 2 of the grades, 3rd in 2 of the grades, and 4th in 1 grade. And combined, that places Wilton 1st in the DIRG in growth across all grade levels.
By a significant amount.
Yep. So that's what I was saying. We are growing kids. We just need to keep at it. We know what works. We know what promotes growth.
And what are your thoughts on that 3-year growth to achievement kind of timeline that the SBA models out?
I think it depends upon which students you're talking about.
Okay.
I think for some of our students who receive specialized services and support, that might be too ambitious.
Okay.
Not that I would ever want to put a ceiling on somebody's ability to grow, but I think that was more of a political thing.
Okay.
I'm not sure it was based upon actual research around how quickly kids grow. I have to say, this growth is important. The growth statistics in the map are much more helpful. What they do is that they look, so a student receives a particular score, a RIT score, they look nationally about what is the average growth for kids. And
Okay.
that's how they set growth targets. And then you can measure what percentage, and some of our kids are more than 100% of their growth targets on the map. So I tend to look at that data,
Okay.
growth data, rather than this.
Okay.
But we only get this once a year. So it's a little easier, because in MAP, we can look at growth from fall to winter, winter to spring, and then we can, for some kids, look from fall to spring. So it's good. So, we're back to the performance of students who receive special ed services and supports, both within and across cohorts. 6th grade and again 7th grade are the bright spots here. Notice the theme, 7th grade, right?
2 years in a row.
Yes. All right, and then the next slide again is just to add the actual numbers and to put it in context. We're not talking about large numbers of students here. All right, on the next door, we do have an achievement gap, but if you look back to our results historically, it is narrowing over time. I'm very pleased with the progress that our students with special needs are making, because for a long time they weren't making much progress.
Could we get a historical
Yeah,
chart?
yeah.
Thank you. For both the ELA and the math.
Sure, we can do that. All right, let's move on to science. Another very good story. So you look here in the right-hand column, it tells a really nice story about Cider Mill's work around science over the past several years. Next slide. Same is true for Middlebrook. Very nice growth. And then finally, a very spectacular story for Wilton High School. Right?
Yes.
We were hovering in the 70s, we even dipped down into the 60s, and now we're at 90%. It's amazing. All right, so this is the DERG comparison. We're in the middle of the pack in 5th grade, second in 8th grade, and first by a mile in 11th grade.
So what changed? I mean, I don't
One of my
mean-
questions. Did we know what we did?
Yes, we do.
Make
Kids
it-
surprised. I wonder if teachers are better for, like, do we know what happened?
Yeah, maybe we could have Trudy come and talk, because it's not something that's just a single thing. I think it was a lot of work done over a number of years that really came together this past year.
That's great. And Chuck, when did they take the NGSS? What month?
I think it's in May?
It's in May.
Got it, so this is last year's 11th grade.
Yes.
Got it.
About a week before Memorial Day, usually for high school.
Okay, next slide. I find this slide to be a little confusing, but it's comparing students who receive special ed supports with students who do not. There's still an achievement gap, but it does narrow as the students get older. And that's kind of what you would like to see, that as the kids get older, the gap narrows. And again, I don't want to be set to a 3-year time frame.
Yeah.
I think by the time the kids get to high school, we're doing a very nice job with those kids. Connecticut School Day SAT. These are the results in total and broken down by level.
And what month is that taken?
That's taken, I think it's March for the initial, April for the makeup.
So it's all the spring still? So
Yes.
it's 11th grade?
Yes. Okay, next one. This is historical data for ELA.
And Chuck, what are the breakdowns for level 1 through 4 for SAT?
That's the,
But I mean, is it like a numerical value for the SATs?
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a range on the SAT, so like at level 1, you might go up to 480 or something, and then.
Got it.
we could share that with you if you're
That's
interested.
okay. I don't want to give you more work, I was just curious.
Okay, next slide, the historical data for math.
We do have more kids meeting
Yep.
3 and 4.
Yep,
Yeah, and dramatic drop in level 2.
yep,
So that's really a great story.
yes. Well,
The same with ELA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually, this is the real story. We're first in ELA and second in math, and the first in total score on the Connecticut SAT, combining ELA and math. And remember, we were first in science too. So I just want to say the high school really knocked it out of the park this year, and I think they deserve a lot of our recognition and appreciation for their hard work. The next one is SPED versus non-SPED. There are still some areas of improvement, most notably with our students who receive special ed services. Okay, advanced placement. This is the number of subjects tested and how our students scored across levels. Level 3 and above is what is needed to get credit, and we are above 90% of our kids scoring 3 or better, which is the next slide. So this
So
is,
Chuck,
yeah.
24 subjects were tested, so 300, what's this quantitative number, 300?
That's the number of students who scored a 5. Correct, Matthew?
Correct.
Got it. So some kids probably took more than one.
Yes.
Lots of kids.
Yeah. No, but these aren't subjects as in students, these are subjects
As
as.
in
Those are the
academic
number of
subjects.
different types of tests we have, everything from 3D art to multivariable calculus.
Got it.
Okay. So this slide is the percent passing and participation. I do have to say there is some trend not to take tests. We've seen that over a number of years. Did you want to say anything about that, Bob? I mean, I think it's,
You know, there are students who are already into really challenging colleges and universities, and they take the course and they don't take the test because there's less to gain by doing so. There are often instances where they're not gonna get the college credit that previously they were awarded. So, the reality is some of our best students, our highest achieving students come in and say, you know, I've done well in the course and I'm not gonna take the test, and they can choose to opt out. Many do. Yeah.
How much do they cost these days?
How much do they
How much do the kids pay for each test?
I don't know the exact, you know the exact.
I don't, my daughter took it a couple of years ago, I think it was $75
I know,
a
but,
test, but.
like, it's different in every district?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll.
I can find it for you.
Okay,
Because
I
we have
just
it in
know.
our letters, yeah.
It's pretty, it used to be, I mean,
Yeah.
when it was $90, that's pretty prohibitive. If your kid wants to take, is taking 4 or 5 APs.
That's
you
what
know.
happened. I mean, I've spoken with parents who, again, have their students into very good colleges and say, you know, I don't need to pay for 4 AP exams right now. There's nothing to be gained, so, except pride.
Well, and some of them don't want to, if you're gonna be a chemistry major, you don't want to test out of freshman chemistry, because you want to take it from your university.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
okay, next slide, Matthew. Okay, this tells us the percentage of students who have participated in AP during their high school years, which last year was 2/3 of the senior class. And then this is, so there had been a bit of a dip in AP performance during the pandemic, but we seem to have recovered to pre-pandemic levels.
And an AP scholar is defined as 3 or above, or just someone taking an AP?
It's the
Depends on
number
how many.
who pass, I think, 3 exams,
3 exams, 3 or above.
3 or, yeah.
Yeah, got it.
So we had more test takers in the past, so we had therefore more scholars, but again, last year was better than the pandemic. So our historical average was much higher, but again, there's a trend. All right, the ACT, little change except for the downward trend in the number of students taking the ACT. I think that reflects colleges and universities that have started test optional.
We offer the ACT at local high school? Who takes it? Who takes the ACT at local high school?
A lot of people
A
do.
lot of kids.
We have
My kid never took it.
No, mine
That's
didn't
something
either,
that
but,
everybody takes.
but a lot of kids do take it.
We have quite a few. At one point, when the last iteration of the new SAT, the percentage has actually went up quite a bit. So we have a fair amount of students who take the ACT. It's an option,
Is everyone given the option to take it?
if they want to. They work with their school counselors, and students know, depending on where they want to apply, and sometimes where they want to be regionally. Yeah. So it's an option.
Yeah, that was my understanding, that ACT is more utilized in certain parts of the country. than
Big in the
others.
Midwest.
Big in the Midwest.
But it's the same thing, like SATs, you're not actually taking it through high school, you're taking it through the college board, so the ACT is just set up the same
It just
way.
completely passed me by when
Oh,
I
okay.
graduated.
I wouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
I haven't lost any sleep over that.
All right, and this last slide. These are the percentages of students who enter and persist or complete their freshman year of college for the DER. The data unfortunately is never very current, but we are at or very near the top in the state for the DER.
So what does persistence mean?
That means they finished
1
their
year.
freshman year, correct?
It means they enrolled at their sophomore year,
Yeah.
means they stayed in college.
So
Oh,
the
okay.
first one is entrance, they started college,
Okay.
and then the persistence is they stayed for their second year.
What does it take into account people that switch colleges?
It really is done by the National Clearinghouse data. So I was telling Chuck, if your student goes to McGill University, they don't count, or University of Edinburgh, they don't count. So depends on what you transfer out of, but if you stay within, I believe as long as you're enrolled in a 2 or 4 year college, you still get credit on the clearinghouse. I can look that up, but, this shows we prepare kids very well for college and they do well in college. Our graduation rates of college after 4 and 6 years is usually among the top 2 or 3 in the state. So we prepare kids very well for college. We have for years.
And how long will it be before we'll see the numbers from 2021 and 21?
Every year they update this graph. So this is public
Okay.
data. It's on EdSite,
Yeah.
the sort of state report card for everything, so.
Given the decline in uptake in the AP, exam, and kind of if I'm remembering correctly, there's been an increase in uptake in the UConn credit classes. Is there a way we can start looking at that as well?
Sure.
And seeing, what the uptake rates are on those and what the, I don't know, if there's an exam at the end of that, or the percentage of kids who get credit or achieve that.
That data we can get?
We can
That
get that.
milestone,
Yeah.
because I know that there's definitely been an increase in kids pursuing that option. And I know it's not captured in some of the national, ranking, systems, just that I'm more focused on AP and international baccalaureate classes. So, but I think it would be, continue to round out the story and maybe help us look at resources in terms of what is it the kids in the high school are more inclined to take or want to see in future years.
You're right, it doesn't count in the next generation accountability standards and that.
Well, it also doesn't count the
Well,
US
no,
News
dual
and World
enrollment does
Reports.
count in that one standard.
Yeah.
So if they are dual enrolled, that is in that college and career preparation coursework.
Okay,
Dual enrollment does count for that, as long as we have it coded correctly, and I believe Sandy's gone in and really been diligent about
But
coding.
that's for the state accountability.
That's for state accountability. It doesn't count for like US News and School Reports,
but also even
college,
just for
high
future
school.
planning in terms of looking, over time as to where, how kids are planning their 4-year course of study and how they're looking to, align themselves up for the graduation process or the college application process.
Well, it'll also be interesting because I think AP is such a well-known test, like, I think for parents, who, there may be, we should look at that too, like how many parents understand the.
But the
early-
UConn option
Yeah.
or the other types
Yeah.
of accrediting options, yeah.
That would be very simple because most of the students who are in those courses, the credit is granted just by completing the course. There's very few that have a UConn exam in addition to just finishing the course here. So it's really just looking at who successfully finishes the course.
By finishing, you mean any grade, or just?
No, they do have to have a certain
Okay.
grade that they achieve to get the dual
Okay.
credit. And one thing that's of interest and to note is that there have been more schools, universities that don't accept the AP credit as college credit. But once you take the dual enrollment UConn ECE course, you get a transcript from UConn, and then that's like transferring credit from college to college. So it's widely accepted as transfer credit, not 100%, but I want to say around 98 or 99%.
So that could also be a tuition saver.
Could be.
Thank you.
you. So, oh, sorry. With college persistence, is it only finishing freshman year, or is there any data to who graduates
Yeah,
from
Matthew
college?
was mentioning that. What's the other data we have about colleges? You said the 4- and 6-year completion rates?
Yes, and I'll have to find out. I didn't see it they've redone some of the dashboards, so I might have to dig back and maybe reach out to the state.
We
but-
can certainly do
Okay,
that.
that would be-
Yeah. They give you the percentages of kids who completed within 4 years and then 6
Yeah.
years. So we can
Yes.
do that, hopefully.
I have 2 questions for you. What is the plan in place to support the grades that need extra support? That's my first question.
So, yeah, I don't want to preempt future board presentations because I know Kevin will be scheduling time for the buildings and for me to talk to you about what our plans are. But I can tell you, it's not much different than what we've done in prior years. We do know that the acceleration framework is the framework that seems to be promoting this great level of growth that we're seeing. So it's doubling down on responsive lesson planning, using formative assessments, making sure that we are emphasizing more about the work. But also, we have a very robust intervention program. And actually, next week, we're going to be meeting with all of the interventionists to make sure that given the data that we have right now on the right kids in the intervention, how are we going to monitor their progress? But we can give you a much more detail answer to that when we do the presentation of the action plans.
The next,
Is it the next meeting?
or 2 meetings, 2.
My second question, this is not the first time I've asked me to your first slide that showed all the testing that we do. I'm back to my question. We test our kids a lot and spend a lot of days testing. You guys talk to, well, you guys are all sitting here. Does anybody have an idea? I've heard some teachers talk about the number of days that we actually test our kids. Has anybody actually written that down and had a conversation with you and
So we
central
discuss
office?
it, we discuss it every year. We have tried to structure things in such a way that it is not as disruptive as it had been in prior years. And as I said before, we're getting very close to achieving our goals. Once we do, I think we can then have a discussion about assessments. In good conscience, I could not support cutting back on the frequency with which we assess our students when we haven't met our goals. That's my opinion.
Chuck, what assessment would you cut back on?
I'm sorry?
Which assessment would you cut back on?
I think probably the math. I think we could actually do it twice a year.
And is there still a pushback from I remember being in Miller Driscoll, so many students were just anxiety at Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill. Do you still see that?
Over the map?
Yeah.
No, we keep it pretty late, so.
So the 3 times a year doesn't bother the
Well,
students?
kindergarten only takes it twice, so that's,
Yeah.
I think part of
that's,
In
I
fact,
agree with Chuck, you could go down to 2, you could go down to 2. The first administration, I feel like really sometimes measures the,
Summer slide.
summer slide, and so
Mhm.
I think that's one that you could just use whatever the end of year score was
Mhm.
for the
Just
year
knowing it's
before.
gonna be-
I'm just gonna speak for my
I
And then
agree.
not give the first one in the fall, and then give.
Yeah, it seems like the fall one
I mean,
seems to be
if you open
the.
the door to 2, I'm jumping right.
I'm jumping right with them.
As I've said, and I'll say again, I
I
can
know.
certainly support that when we achieve our goals.
We've had lots of conversations about
Yes. I personally think that the summer slide, the information we get in the fall is very helpful, particularly with the blueprints for learning, and making sure that that recruitment period is used wisely.
I will say we have worked hard for our little assessments to cut down on the number of assessments so that overall it feels a little better.
I think there's also something to, I think sometimes we call it a test, and in my mind, at least, I'm trying to, I think of it more as a diagnostic tool, and that it's used to inform instruction in a way that, perhaps lowering the temperature around the kind of, testing culture, the testing idea around it.
Absolutely.
And
in
so I
fact-
think that's something that the district that can work on.
Tomorrow in the afternoon, we have NWEA coming to talk about that very thing, about how to present it to kids in a way that is low, and how we can use use the results to drive research.
And I think also that's important to communicate out to, parents in the community at large.
Yes.
To kind of foster a greater understanding about what it's used for with what the purpose is.
Well, I think we also need the school community to understand that, because it's really about the kids and what the kids need. It's not an assessment of the teachers. And I think that's a lot of like where the stress will come from. The teachers feel like there's a lot of there was a point where it felt like that was coming from the teachers, and so I think the teachers, no, they're not gonna be, putting from the fire exit or
Yes,
whatever,
that it's
like,
used to.
yeah, it really is just something that is to help the kids, as you said. That's a really good way to put it, the diagnostic.
I agree with your comment. I also think that our parents, right, I mean, we use this information to possibly suggest intervention for our kids. So I think we as parents are
Tutoring.
then, hey, don't mess around when you take the test, like actually focus and try your best, right? So we can call it, our teachers can call it whatever they want to, but at home, they're getting a different message.
We always want kids to do their best, but they shouldn't get stressed out. And we would never place anybody in intervention on a single data. We look at a multitude of data and trends over time. Now, if a kid is scoring above benchmark twice during the year, then suddenly they have a low benchmark, it's not an automatic driven. That could just be one model.
Could be. We have other people in this district that have different.
Experiences?
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, maybe we should talk about that so that I can help with that.
I just, at some point, we should make public how many days out of a year we test our kids.
We don't test all day.
I know,
How many days
and I know you
are-
guys have tried to cut down how many hours a day, and then what do we do on the third day when half of the class is done, but the other class isn't, but there's still a lot of time that our kids are sitting around, and it's, we go back to instructional time and not wanting to constantly be interrupting it, and we've changed specials, and we've changed all these really cool things that our kids used to have to allow them to have more teaching time. But then we stop them constantly. I mean, in the class, like that bottom list of testing, I mean,
That's not
There's
tests,
a
those are assessments.
okay, it's all the same to me.
But
You're
it's
still
not.
putting a kid in, you're asking them specific questions or looking at certain skills to see how they're doing, right? So you're still measuring their progress. I mean, it's different than a standardized test, yes, but at the same time, you're gathering information on how these kids are doing, and then you're using it to
Yeah.
determine next steps.
So would you want teachers to blindly go through instruction without any information about what the students need?
I don't think that's fair.
Well, it sounds like it.
I'm asking on a whole to look at the number of days that we
And we can,
assess.
and Jen, you know that I do look at that very carefully, because I do get feedback from the staff about it. If I didn't think it was a valuable expenditure of time, then I would stop doing it. I would say the proof is in the pudding. We are increasing the number of students who are meeting benchmark, we're showing significant growth, and again, when we meet our goals, I think it would be time for us to take a different look at it. That is my opinion, right?
I know, we just, we
I'm
hear
not the
from
only
teachers a
decision
lot.
maker. Yeah,
Right, and I just am trying to be fair and also as a kid and having a parent, being a parent and having kids and just thinking
Mhm.
about as a whole, it's a lot, and I get the results, I get all that, and I get that this town and this district and the DIRG, everybody cares about numbers and how we rank, and I do. I see the point and I understand your role in this district, and that's why you're all for it. I just would like to be open with, and try to find other ways that we can support our kids, and obviously there's plenty of ways to check their progress without having a bazillion tests at the same time.
It's very stressful for the kids.
Yeah, and again, if it
Very
is stressing
stressful.
the kids out, we need some work to do, because it shouldn't be stressful for the kids. It shouldn't be. You try your best. We're just
Right.
trying to figure out what your needs are so that your teachers can teach you better. That's all.
So I always thought of it, in full disclosure, my kids went through it before math testing. So, but I think of the child who's really well behaved and doesn't cause any problems and just kind of skims along and, and that's where I found the math testing so attractive, because there are kids who are like that, who kind of get lost because they're not.
I think that's a generalization.
I think it's a generalization
Yeah,
to say
I'd
that
be
all the
careful to
kids are
say
stressed
that.
out. I think we have to be
I didn't
careful
say
on
they were
all the
stressed
things
out.
that we,
No.
no, I just
Yes.
say, we have to be careful on all the things that we say.
But I'm just
And
saying it.
Yes,
I was
so I
trying to
think
say
that,
this
yes.
might help some
Yes,
kids that.
yes.
we don't even know about.
Okay. Any other questions for Chuck?
No, I'm gonna piggyback on your comment, only because, and I
Yeah,
promise we can
no.
move on.
No, that's fine, Jen, we don't.
We have amazing teachers in our district that I truly feel know how all their kids are doing, and I don't think we always need to rely on all this other information, right? I mean, our teachers know. I could ask any of my teachers about my kid, and every single one of them can tell me how my kid is doing without having to look at a map or without having to look at ASPA testing or whatnot. I just, thinking of our whole district as a whole, that's the only reason I always bring it up to you.
Yeah, and Jen, I
I see
think
the
we can,
benefits, I just see the other side
and
also.
I guess we can agree to disagree on this.
Correct.
I believe that, yes, I would hope that your teachers would be able to tell you how they're doing. The map gives them a broader view than what they get from those bottom assessments. Those assessments are very granular and are subject-specific. They're not going to necessarily catch the standards that kids are missing or missed in the prior grade level. It's a good way to measure progress, in my opinion.
Well, I also think that it's important to ensure assured experiences across the classrooms and across the grades. And that making sure that, every fourth grader, or every third grader is having access and getting access to the same learning and is meeting the same standard is an important aspect of what the overall district does as well. So I think there's a part of just finding the balance, and I think that's what we consistently try to talk about and do at this table.
Let's meet our goals. Then we can have a discussion. And we're close. We're getting so close to meeting our goals. So I think we're very close to having that discussion.
All right, then you promise me, because I'm on my way out, that you are gonna stay on top of this.
Oh, well.
Because I won't be here, although maybe I'll show up at
Yes,
the
just
top
show
of
up.
this.
We have 2 administrators who agree with you,
Got
Jen,
it.
so that's good.
Is everybody ready to move on to the
Yes,
tri-state?
I promise I will stop talking.
No, you don't have to stop. I'm just, if anybody else has any other questions or. Fran, Tri-State Consortium.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm going to give you a little bit of context. You've heard me speak about this in the past. So in a sense, this is an update, but we hadn't talked about the actual report that came out of the visit. So let me just bring everybody back to the context of this. So the Tri-State Consortium is a network of school districts in the Tri-State in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. The group serves as critical friends to support us and their member districts in our efforts for continuous improvement. Typically, there's a team of about 15 or more members that come into a school district, and for 3 days, they focus on one area that we feel is important and we want to get feedback on. In February, Wilton hosted a team from Tri-State to focus on the development and integration of the Portrait of a Graduate. During the course of the 3 days, the members of the team were presented with an introduction to how the Portrait of the Graduate was developed. They visited classrooms. They met with all the stakeholder groups from teachers, students, parents to Board of Ed members, as you all recall. And additionally, they visited classrooms, they reviewed artifacts, they looked at student work. So it was an all-encompassing type of experience for these members. After the visit, the Tri-State team prepared a report, which is what you have a copy of. And they looked at one of the 8 quality indicators that they have in a framework that they've developed. The framework includes rubrics and provides guidelines for the feedback that we receive. For the visit to Wilton, the team reviewed what they observed from the lens of Indicator 7, which refers to creating a shared vision and environment for change. This indicator looks at shared vision and goals focused on student performance that have been developed by the staff and community that are well articulated, clearly communicated, and consistently pursued throughout the district and school community and include student voice. The vision expects, supports, and recognizes risk-taking, creativity, and innovation as components of change. In support to this indicator, the committee, as we actually developed, considered two of the questions that we wanted them to look at as they were considering that indicator. The first was, to what extent does the staff, parent community understand, support, and integrate the district vision as articulated through the Portrait of the Graduate? And the second was, to what extent does the Portrait of the Graduate continue to encourage the district's commitment to innovation? Okay, so that's the context. So now the report provides both commendations as well as helpful feedback to us in terms of how do we move forward with operationalizing the Portrait of the Graduate. So I'll start with, I think, an overall accolade, and I'll quote from the report. The use of the Long-Range Planning Committee to craft the Portrait of the Graduate leveraged at its start the culture of community engagement that strongly exists in Wilton. It created an aspirational yet foundational driver that will ensure the students possess the broad range of critical competencies and understandings that will enable them to be well prepared to navigate our volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous nature of their world. Remember VUCA? Okay, so they actually quoted that. The multi-year process involving a multitude of voices and research-based practices was an important recognition, especially since we were, in a sense, provided with a barrier during the entire pandemic. We were in the process of doing all this work. I think you may recall the Board of Ed adopted the Portrait of the Graduate. We were in a pandemic, so that was basically our timing. The other commendations to note were the fact that they really liked our, let's see if I have one here, our brand identity, marketing, and awareness. So like a lot of these things that you've seen across the district, the posters on our website, we have, and I've got to say, kudos to Lucille, who has been part of this very much so, has been able to provide that identity that is so important to the Portrait of the Graduate. We also created videos. The students actually created videos on it. We've got them on the website. They also said that the Portrait of the Graduate is anchored in the district's values and has broad support from stakeholders. All of the groups that they spoke to were very much committed and thought that this was something that was very important. It was also noted that it's been integrated in some of our courses and some of our curriculum. The Flight Digital Literacy course and the advisory program at the high school was designed to actually build that awareness about the Portrait of the Graduate. Through the digital literacy class, students begin actually creating the portfolio, this e-portfolio version using Google Site. The Portrait of the Graduate has also served to increase performance in project-based learning across content areas. In some cases, secondary level teachers have put it upon themselves to integrate it already. It's taken root in lots of different places, according to the report. We were commended for promoting risk-taking and innovative learning strategies. Of note was the Capstone e-portfolio, which is something that the high school is doing and really came through in the report as something that we're doing very well. There was also evidence that we're integrating it through our curriculum review process, which we are. Our program philosophies incorporate and align to the Portrait of the Graduate. We've integrated it through our teacher evaluation process. That was also noted. I think that what is most helpful is when we look at the reports such as this, is to consider what is recommended in terms of improvement. So I'll just go over some of the things that I think are the big ideas that we really came out. One was looking at the Portrait of the Graduate through the lens of our youngest learners, and the fact that we need to consider crafting language as well as maybe even the graphics that are a little bit different and more accessible to that age group. One of the comments was, don't call it a Portrait of the Graduate, call it a Portrait of the Learner. At that point, it might be more appropriate. Our plan should be something that looks at what 5 years down the line looks like. So they recommended that we create a plan that has an implementation timeline 5 years out, and that we convene a design task force, as they called it, to develop that plan, to advise and to ensure that the implementation across the district is successful. They suggested we provide more opportunities for teachers to collaborate across the district, to actually analyze student work perhaps let's take a look at what, students are producing through their e-portfolio and share that with, folks at Middlebrook. One of the suggestions was to take the idea of the e-portfolio and begin finding ways to include it in other transition years, like grade 2, grade 5, grade 8, et cetera, so that we can actually track growth of our students as they go through the experience and they are growing through the 6 attributes. They also felt that we could increase our stakeholder communication. Even though we're doing things well, we could do things even better, make it more present with our parents, with our students, and throughout the community. And then there was, part of the report that really talked about finding ways of integrating it with our at-risk learners as well as multilingual. I would like to report also that since the report came out, over the course of the summer, we had a day that we devoted to looking at the report as an administrative team. And really talking about what the recommendations were and how we could move forward with it. Some of those elements have already kind of taken hold. We will have our first meeting of this design task force that they talk about next week, as a matter of fact, and it's got membership across the district. We are going to be looking at some of the tools and the resources we have. We have something we call the I can statements, which are skills by grade level band across, the pre-K-12 continuum. That group will be able to take a look at it and make sure that it's aligned properly. Taking a look at some of the recommendations about the e-portfolio and how we can better explicitly use it to instruct with. So I'm looking forward to all the work that's being done. I really want to also recognize all the folks that did so much really to prepare for and to be part of the tri-state visit that actually gave us this feedback that I think is going to be really helpful in moving with our vision and moving forward. I know that we're doing a really good job. I'd just like to also share with you that over this coming weekend, I'm going to be presenting at a instructional technology conference, and it's going to be on crafting the portrait of the graduate. So it's a national conference, and this will be with, and I'll be bringing these. So really excited about that. We serve as a model, I think, in terms of how we've done this.
Any questions for Fran?
I have a couple. They had some great recommendations. I love the 2, 5, 8, the transition years to put something in. I think it allows the community to buy into it a little bit better. I think right now, the really only tie-in is at the high school, and I think that's why so many of the high school parents know more about it. Our little ones, yes, it's being talked about, and it's, implicitly in their, coursework and whatnot. But so all these recommendations, who's the point person? Who is all the work falling on?
I don't think it's going to be one person. I think it's going to be more of like, we'll have this design task force where there'll be leaders. There are, leads at every school that are going to be working on it. Like I said, as a leadership team, we worked on this. So I don't see it. I think it's our shared vision, so it's going to be a shared responsibility.
So who's going to be on the design task force? Is it teachers? Is it administrators?
It's a combination of all that, yeah. We have a number of coaches and instructional leaders, administrators, and teachers. Yeah.
So you're going to meet next week and figure out the objectives and how?
Yes, we're going to kind of look. We have to start with the report in a sense, because that gives us some really good recommendations to move forward, and then as a group, we'll determine what are the things that make most sense to move forward on.
Do you have a timeline for when you expect this?
Not yet. I mean, honestly, they really talked about a 5-year plan. This is something that we really, for it to be embedded properly, throughout the curriculum. Over the summer, when we met as an admin team, we had Dr. Marie Alcock work with us as well. And she was showing us how in some other districts, you know, you take a unit and you've got all your standards and you've got your skills and et cetera that apply to that unit, subject content based, but then you can then look at your portrait of the graduate and look at the I can statements and incorporate them within that unit, so that as you're going through curriculum and you're teaching students, those types of things fall in. This is huge and it's really widely encompassing. I met with our, Kim Zemo and some folks that are looking at this and how much it aligns to SEL standards as well, so that as you're going through it, and we can do a crosswalk, as you're doing the I can statements, you're actually touching upon all those skills as well. So it's a very large and it's a long-term type of effort. So I think in terms of, this group, when we take a look at what can be accomplished in year one, that's what we're going to talk about. What can be accomplished in year 2 or 3?
It seems like we've been talking about portrait of graduate for a number of years now, but in the last year, how much has it moved forward?
So for instance, Fran, we actually have incorporated into our unit planning ways in which people can start integrating portrait of the graduate, and there's a training module that's part of that. So
that's correct.
So you're unit planning within the curriculum review process, or
partly, generally too, but it's over the summer. So over the summer, we have lots of curriculum projects which we'll be sharing with you. So what we're telling people now is when you do a unit, this is something that you need to consider. The problem is we're kind of limited in the number of summer days we have. So it is going to take a number of years for us to get through every single unit and rethink it in terms of portrait of the graduate. But we're chipping away at it. I think we're making good progress, but it's not probably as fast as some people would like to see it. But we'll get there.
Yeah, we've made a lot of progress. If you're looking at the past year, one of the things that I really love about tri-state visits is as you're preparing all of the work, because to get them to come and have this 3-day experience, you have to get all the artifacts, you have to get a number of things to really just show what the path is how much you find out is really going on when you look at across the district. I have binders basically from things that we then put up on Schoology, and we had all these artifacts that really showed, because oftentimes you don't see what's happening in every single area, and then in one place you end up seeing, wow, we have done quite a bit. And I think it's just going to, it's going to continue, especially with this group that's going to be leading it.
So I have a question, because we talked about capstone projects for 2nd, 5th, and 8th graders years ago. What is the plan to move that forward? Like, as Jen said, that would definitely bring in the parents and whatnot, but I feel like it's always been there in the back.
Yeah, and I think we probably would have made more progress if we hadn't had the pandemic.
Okay.
I personally would be very much in favor of a capstone project at each grade level, at each grade band.
Right, I just remember the 8th graders, we had 8th graders come and show us their projects that were very...
Yes.
So are they still doing that in 8th grade?
A little bit. And again, it's not as centered around the portrait of the graduate the way I would like it to be. We have some areas of growth for that, but I think that is the long-term plan. I'm hoping that this task force will lay out a more concrete plan for us to make sure that we're doing this. I'll be honest with you, we've been trying to address it as best we can in the midst of doing everything else. I think we do need to be focused a little bit more.
On the portrait of the graduate?
Yes.
Okay. Because you are all doing a lot.
Yes.
That's why I was asking who's taking this on.
Right.
Well, I have to say, Fran is certainly the lead person or the point person on this, but it's something that the whole coordinator group has really been trying to assume responsibility, because Fran can't do it all, right? We have to, Karen has to think about science and social, English and social studies, Tree has to think about science. And we have to start bringing in the instructional leaders, the district instructional leaders. I do have to say that some teachers love this so much, they're just jumping into it and doing it.
At what level, like the high school teachers?
Mainly
or-
the high school
Okay.
teachers.
And we found actually, as we were going through the whole process, that a lot of things were kind of like, at the grassroots type of level. There were projects and there were different things that the teachers had taken on and worked really well. But we also have some things that we have actually consistently done across the district, like through my program, through the LLC, the Makerspace, the Innovation Space, a lot of the units, they were all aligned to the Portrait of the Graduate.
I would say all of the transdisciplinary.
The
units,
transdisciplinary, absolutely, yeah. So there are elements of it that have been growing despite the pandemic and the fact that we had to pivot to accelerated learning.
I know that anytime there's something new introduced at the grade school level, because those teachers do everything in every subject, that it's important to get their input and feedback, give them participation as you move forward to the second and fifth graders, just make sure the second and fifth grade teachers are, part of the process all along. Because it shouldn't just be one more thing that's
And I think that's
put on their plate.
to make sure that it's just not one more thing.
Yeah,
That it's kind of
exactly.
and why it takes time to integrate
Yeah.
it as into it, so it's more organic and not feeling like just one more thing.
Well, I'd rather see it take more time.
Yes.
And have the teachers involvement as opposed to just Trudy and Karen.
Well, and when I meant they lead the curriculum review
Oh, that makes
process,
sense. Yes, of
and
course.
it's the teachers who actually write the units.
Oh.
But to speak of what you're saying that's one of the reasons why I have been slow walking this a little bit. Trying to integrate it as the units that they're working on anyway, and then that's one unit next year that they have to do something a little bit differently. Over time, we'll build it up to all the units, but we need to be very mindful of how much we're layering new on particularly elementary school teachers.
Yeah. Thanks.
Any other questions for Fran? Thank you very much, Fran. So I believe that brings us to Maria and the bus consultant report. And that's goal 13.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to report out a report that we recently received after engaging with Transportation Advisory Services. Just to give the group a little background, and much of it you may know, but we operate daily 38 buses in 3 tiers or runs. We have a Miller Driscoll run, a Cider Mill run, and then a combined Middlebrook High School run. We have been working with STA, Student Transportation of America, for many years now, and they have served us well through a driver shortage, through the pandemic. Last year, we were able to negotiate a 3-year extension to our contract with very low, and in fact, I would say unheard of increases of 2.25%, 2.5%, 2.75%, where area districts that were renegotiating full contracts were well over that. So we've been happy with them. Certainly we have our hiccups here and there, but compared to what is happening across the state and nationally, we've been very pleased with our service. With that said, we're not complacent, and we wanted to be sure that an operation that is quite costly and is so large is running as efficiently as possible. So after exploring some different services that will come in and really do a comprehensive review of your transportation program and protocols, we decided to work with Transportation Advisory Services. So they came in over the summer, used a variety of different resources, enrollment data, budget documents, and financial reports, transportation policies, our contracts. They looked at our fleet list. They analyzed ridership and other different analyses that they conducted interviews and things like that, and shared this report that you now have with us over the summer. They gave us a number of recommendations in areas like financial, contract management, policies, routing. I'd just like to highlight a few of the ones that we think are most promising, and also give you sort of a preview of the ones that we think are perhaps less promising. First off is a recommendation that we consider route consolidation. They believe that based on the ridership that we have,
there's the potential to consolidate 2 routes per day, which could save the district as much as $1,000 per day. So that's something that we think is very promising, but we want obviously to engage with our contacts at STA. So we have a meeting planned for this month where we're going to be meeting with the local management, but also the regional management to really look at the feasibility of doing something like this. The other thing that we think is promising is looking at our routing annually. And, they're really proposing a starting from scratch routing process. It's not clear to us the extent to which that happens annually. So we want to talk more with STA about if that's happening, if it's not, why, and, what the pitfalls of doing something like that would be. So those are 2 of the most promising things. One of the recommendations that we've actually already put into place, and we put into place last spring, was engaging in regular meetings with management to look at some of these issues that we're dealing with annually. Last spring, we engaged with local management and upper management to look at our athletic transportation. Due to the driver shortage, we were not able to utilize STA as much for our athletic transportation. And as a result, our athletes were riding in style in limousine buses that I'm sure they enjoyed, but were quite costly to us. So we were able to problem solve, and their recommendation is obviously to have those kinds of meetings proactively as opposed to reactively. So that's something that we had already put in place in the spring. And then some things that, are recommendations, but, we're a little bit less enthusiastic about is things like looking at the walker policy and, expanding the distances that we would allow students to walk to their bus stops. Right now, we have a half a mile for students in the elementary level and up to a mile for students at the secondary level. And that's actually half of what the state requires, but we feel comfortable with that. Our streets are not necessarily always having sidewalks, there are a lot of trees, it can make things dark. Obviously, we can save money if we have fewer stops and more centralized locations, but we do have a concern about.
Until they get run over.
Well, safety first, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Looking at policies that might make things a little bit less convenient for families. Obviously, we want to prioritize safety and also the service that we're able to provide to families. So those are some of the recommendations. I mean, you have the summary there, but I just wanted to give you sort of the highlights. Any questions?
So I think my questions were kind of along next steps, so I
Right.
think you already answered
Yes.
that in terms of moving it forward.
Right.
Next week, I mean, certainly the overall, 2-year savings of over $350,000
Potential for that,
is
yes.
the potential for that
Yes.
is
Very
attractive and
exciting.
should be pursued.
Yes.
And I just also, I had written, also just, I know that they talked about increasing the capacity, the 85% capacity, and arranging the buses for actual versus, potential ridership. So just also being thoughtful about what happens in, I don't want to call it an emergency situation, but like a snow closure where all of a sudden every kid gets on the bus. And I definitely like the idea of managing to actual needs versus these small one-off occasions, but also being able to have a system and a process in place to accommodate those as well.
Exactly.
Yes, and I'm glad you said, my alarms went off on safety when they started talking about the centralized,
Sure.
stops and the walking, so.
We're very sensitive to
Yeah.
that. And I think particularly in this area where we don't have sidewalks, where we do have more shaded areas and we don't have, it's not as light, in certain areas in the morning. And, parents are concerned about those kinds of things, and so are we, obviously. Just to speak to that, one of the recommendations was to look at most of our buses are very large capacity buses, and there was a recommendation to move to lower capacity buses to save money. One issue that we will talk about that with STA, but one issue that I anticipate is that, we have buses that break down that have to be swapped out with other buses. And so if we don't have as many large capacity buses, it gives us less flexibility to switch buses on the spot. And you have to really, you don't want to take buses out of service to switch them out. You want to have them on site. And we do have a number built into our contract that are used as spares. So, these are all things that we're going to explore. But I just want to, we want to be mindful of the fact that sometimes recommendations aren't always, we can't take them at face value. There's usually a story behind why we can't pursue all of them.
No, I appreciate that.
So consolidating buses, great, it's gonna save money. It's gonna be a huge change, because that means we have to change school start times, right?
No, well, according to this analysis, there is some overlap on the routes. And based on the way that the routes overlap and the ridership, we may actually be able to combine routes, right? So, if there are two buses that are going into generally similar areas, we may be able to combine those routes into one and actually save a bus.
Okay, so that's, you're
So-
consolidating
right.
routes, you're not consolidating, there's still gonna be 3 bus routes.
Yes, there will
Sorry,
still.
that was my
yeah.
confusion.
There
Okay.
will still be
And
two buses.
we're still keeping that 40-minute upper limit,
Yes.
correct?
Right, and so
Yes.
that's another thing to think about, is we can combine routes. However, is it going to be a 60-minute bus
Right.
ride for a student? In which case, that's something we would be concerned about,
So
so.
the state, is there a state rule?
I think it's
on
an
how
hour.
Bus ride can be?
Isn't it
It's
an
state
hour?
laws now, but we benchmark at 40 minutes.
Yeah, our expectation is that it's 40 minutes for.
But with our capacity so low, are any buses really at 40 minutes? Like, I feel like
I think
when
it
you
said
look
the
at
average
like,
in the report was 31. Is
when
that
you
what it
look
said?
at like, some of these buses have 5, 6, 7 kids. Those, like, that must make the
Well-
average really short.
And those are, I believe, the actuals, so buses will not stop at stops if students are not there.
Yeah.
Right, so, I think if you account for stopping at every
Yeah,
stop.
got it.
That's something to think about too.
Got it.
But if buses, come near a stop and notice there are no students there, they're
Right, they
not
just go,
stopping every
yeah.
single time.
Are we required to staff or to bus up according to the number of students? Because I know today, from Lucille, that in Darien, you can opt out of having your kid ride the bus.
So we're required to provide transportation for every student who attends school here. Okay, they have a right to attend school, we have a responsibility to transport them. I'm not very familiar with what's happening in Darien, but I think what they're doing is they're going with actual ridership, and they're prepared to offer transportation to families that opt in, with the condition that it's, I think, a 2-week turnaround, right? So you can't opt out and then decide tomorrow that you want your child to ride the bus, right? So because they need time to conduct the routing again, right? So, we're watching that, and we're interested in knowing how that's working this year. I think that's a brand new approach that they're taking. And we're also interested in knowing what their plan is for inclement weather, when more students are going to need to ride the bus. But that's something that we are, curious
You've got
about.
your eyes on.
Yeah.
Because I'd be curious to know how those changes that affect all the other kids on the route. If you're constantly adjusting, like parents' times that they have to expect the bus
Right.
to come or not come if you arrange for care or plan your
Right.
commute or anything like that on a consistent.
So those are all
Yeah.
considerations, right? How do you communicate those changes to families? What is the impact on families? But we are obligated to provide transportation to every student who needs it. And typically, school districts operate under the assumption that every child could need it, and so that's how they route.
Maria, when was the last time we did a study like this?
I don't recall the last time that we did one. So I can look into that. I don't know that we even have one.
It's okay, you've been here a long time.
Well, I've only
It's
been
okay.
overseeing transportation for about 7 years, so in my 7 years here.
A long time, okay.
I wonder about the route consolidation, because I know on busy roads, they'll have a bus riding both way down the road.
Right.
Like, I don't think we wanna consolidate if that means crossing Belden Hill.
Across the
Yeah.
road, right. So safety first, you know, every time we engage in these exercises to ensure that we're optimizing the routes and being as efficient and economically responsible as possible, we don't wanna do that. We don't wanna compromise safety in order to do that, so.
There was a comment in here about having low ridership allows the contractor to charge additional amounts.
I'm sorry, what was that?
There was a comment in here that says having low ridership
Yeah.
allows the contractor to charge additional amounts. Is that, do we get charged additional amounts?
Well, no, it's talking about the fact that we get charged a daily rate regardless of how long the buses are running.
Okay.
It's a 5-hour, it assumes a 5-hour day.
Got it.
And that's one of the recommendations.
right.
I'm not optimistic that a bus company would, you know.
I don't know why they would agree to.
Right.
So is that
Yeah.
live miles that they were talking about
Yes,
versus that actual
exactly,
time?
Exactly.
And-
Now, you know, that's something for us to consider because we're going to be renegotiating a bus contract next fall, you know, for the following school year. So it's really timely to have a report like this because there are things that we can do immediately and then there are things that we can think about for the future. And just from a strategy standpoint, we are gonna be renegotiating again in a year. So there are things that we can think about. I'm just not optimistic that bus companies, you know, will do things like that because it doesn't, you know, you try to find something that's fair for both parties, right? And it's pretty standard for bus companies to charge by a 5-hour day or, you know, however they define a day as opposed to hours that they're actually on the road.
Right. Otherwise, who's keeping track of
The hours.
all of that information? Oh, I guess that, they
Yeah.
can do that though.
Well, and it's
They
pretty
are.
standard. You know, our school days are our school days.
Right.
You know, so it's not like there's a lot of variability on, you know, how long the buses are out each day.
Okay. My last question was about the fuel. Have you guys thought about that, us purchasing versus taking
We do.
them? We purchase our own?
Yes.
Okay.
So if you can cross that off the possibilities
Yeah.
and put that on actual.
Got it. Did they not know that? Like, why did they make that a future
I'm
recommendation?
not sure about, I'll double check on that, but it's
Okay.
my belief that we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the SDA are responsible for the routing, we don't do that within the district?
So we do that, we have a transportation liaison, who is new this year, it's Elaine Walker. She wears many hats, and we're very lucky to have her. And so she works with Traversa and STA, they're, you know, it's sort of a joint effort. But we've also been thinking about having a routing expert come in and support that work as well, so that you have an outsider's perspective.
This is my sense. Is there somewhere that all the historical reasons we have certain roads are stored? I'm just thinking, like, as someone whose child got bus drove off the street, and so it's like, you're not supposed to turn a certain direction, you know, or Scribner Hill is the obvious one, when a bus drove off that, they can only go one direction down Scribner Hill. Is there anywhere that's things like that?
Oh, so we don't lose that information or
Yeah.
that knowledge when
Right.
we would do the routing?
I
If
would
we-
look into that. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of, sort of institutional knowledge that Dan Pacino, who is the, regional, the manager here in Wilton, he's been with the company for a long time. He was a dispatcher prior to being a manager. And I would imagine there are certain things that are put into the system, but I don't have the specificity.
Yeah, I
on
just
this.
was
I can look
curious.
into that for you.
I think this is great that we pursue this.
Yes.
And that we're moving forward with some of the recommendations. and,
Absolutely.
Look forward to hearing where some of these things come out. I'm sure there'll be more of a discussion during budget season.
We will give you updates,
Yep.
absolutely. Thank you.
Next is, review and discuss bylaw 9120, election of officers. This reflects a requested change that has been through the governance committee and the policy committee and has received legal review. And I will just open it up around the table for any questions. This is a first read. Any questions?
I've got one comment about it, and I know we've talked about this. The only other thing, can we put dates on here in terms of when a survey goes out?
Yeah. The only reason why I'm hesitant to do, and we can certainly think about it, but can kick it back and think about it. I just want to be thoughtful of like calendar changes and when that second Tuesday, when the organizational meeting is set in any one given calendar year. So I don't want there to be dates that then.
Maybe timelines, like X amount of time after
2 weeks
versus
before,
dates.
2 weeks
Yeah,
after,
2 weeks after, 2 weeks before.
something. Just so that it's not offered up the week before. I'm not saying that it would be, it just, if it's written, it's easier just to say, this is the
Can I send me a send?
Yeah, oh, that's fine, yeah.
Send a recommendation and then it'll get kicked back for the second week.
Does this address any, like, I
That
don't
was
need to
my
look
hope.
at you, Jen.
Oh,
but,
no,
like,
it's okay,
what-
it was my
Yeah,
issue.
Yeah, no, so I just want to know if you feel like this addresses any of that,
I do.
or-
I think it's not a perfect process ever. I
Right.
think that this helps the whole process be a little more transparent than it has been in the past.
Yeah.
And that, you know, what people choose to do on their phones or behind closed doors is, you can never prevent that, but at
Right.
least this tries to level the playing field a little bit.
Right, that makes
Um,
good.
So,
Okay.
yeah, thank you for asking.
And I just had a question about the organizational meeting presiding over the board chair running the organizational meeting? Because what happens if the board chair is gone?
It provides for it that if the board chair is gone, then it's the vice chair, and if it's not the vice
What if
chair,
they're
then
all
it's the
gone?
secretary.
I mean, like, you know.
Oh, literally, yeah.
Like what happened in 2019, right? Like, all 3 officers were off the board.
So, that's interesting. I don't think that they thought about that when they wrote the original bylaw.
Do they just
The
keep
one way to,
numbers?
What?
well, what you could do is you
Oldest
can,
standing, but there would be 2 oldest.
Well, like we used to
you can
elect
elect an
a
interim,
chair
yes, just for the organizational meeting. We can do that, and as long as, I guess, you're gonna suggest a date change, then we can call council and ask for language around putting
Yeah.
in a temporary, or we could call it an organizational meeting overseer or something along those lines, that then, just in the event that there is not an officer at the table.
But I also think even if the current chair is at the table, or current officers, that maybe, again, to transparency or just making it as even a playing field as possible, that it might make sense to have someone who's not interested in being an officer be the chair for the organizational meeting.
Okay.
Just, you know, because I think,
No,
there's no
that's-
reason not to, I mean, there's no, you know, that's just my thought, that, I think the board has kind of fallen into I don't know how to describe it, but, you know, every organizational meeting should be fresh. I mean, like. Okay, thanks, I just meant, like, there's no reason.
Yeah, there's no
you know,
reason to,
like,
yeah.
It seems like the board has had this problem of every year doing the same
Yes.
officers or whatever, and so
Yeah.
maybe,
No, that's,
that
Yeah.
would help the board approach each organizational meeting as a fresh start, like, there's no reason that, so that's just a thought I had.
so beyond those 2 recommendations, any other questions, discussion? So we will bring it back at the next meeting for a second reading, incorporating those 2
Okay,
items. Future business, there will be a book talk at the library. I know extra seats have opened up on the 17th Take Back the Game with Jennifer Wallace. Her book features Wilton prominently in a chapter, and it's about managing the achievement culture. There'll be the next regular meeting on October 19th, and then November 2nd, and then November 16th. Also attached to tonight's materials was the September 23 enrollment report. Are there comments from the public? None in the room and none online. It is 8:46 and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Online?
It should, it's in, yeah, and it should be in board docs with the material.